testimony you're about to watch is the first of several I have recorded. After sharing what God has done in my life and seeing the positive impact it has made, I felt compelled to share what God has done and is still doing in people's lives. Melissa's testimony is powerful, and I cannot wait for you guys to watch. Be blessed.
I've gone to church as long as I can remember. My mom took me and my brothers to church from a very young age. Most of my memories are at church with my friends there and my mom. My dad didn't go to church with us until a little later on. The church that I grew up in was a little different than a lot of places. It was a church that taught me that you could lose your salvation at any moment, that you pretty much had to be perfect in order to be a Christian. So growing up, it was a lot of anxiety and a lot of shame, guilt, just things from feeling like I wasn't good enough, like I wasn't adding up to what I was supposed to be. I became very self-conscious of myself, and ultimately I became a pretty good liar because I was always afraid that I was going to do the wrong thing, and afraid that not only I would upset the Lord, I would upset my mom mostly, and that wasn't fun for me. It was always a big disappointment for myself whenever I knew I had to tell my mom I did something I shouldn't do, or it was just really hard to feel safe to say anything to anyone whenever you needed to talk to someone, because it was wrong to do anything pretty much. As I got older, I was in school, obviously, and it's hard for kids in school to be a Christian. It's not easy for young kids. I just pretty much acted how I wanted at school and came to church and did what I was supposed to do at church because those were the rules. Nobody ever explained to me that going to church and following rules isn't what makes you a Christian or how you get to heaven or anything like that. I was just doing what I was told because that's what you do. You do what you're told. You come to church on time. You wear the right clothes. You say the right things, or there's going to be problems. As I got to be a teenager, things progress really quickly. When you get to middle school, you start, hanging out with kids, and, there's like bad language, and people are starting to do things like drink or smoke, and I didn't really get into too much of that to begin with, but I was very insecure with myself. So boys would always be something that I was worried about, what they thought about me, how I should act, and what I ultimately was willing to give up of myself to fit in or feel acceptance. When I was 15 almost, I was almost 15, I lost my virginity. I was upset with myself for doing it, something that I really blocked out to the point where I didn't realize that I didn't have my period for a couple months, and then I started getting sick, and it came to me all one day a few months after it happened that I was pregnant. The thought of telling my mom was completely frightening to me. I didn't want anything to do with having any conversation with my mom, let alone a real conversation about what I had done and what I had done wrong ultimately. So I held it in for as long as I possibly could, to the point where I was so sick that my mom was wondering what was going on, and eventually she ended up taking me to the hospital, to emergency, because I had been sick for weeks. So we're on the way to the hospital, and jokingly she says, if you're pregnant, just tell us now. My fight or flight kind of kicked in, and I knew that I couldn't tell my mom that I just had sex and got pregnant. That wouldn't be acceptable. So I said the first thing that came to my mind, and that was that I was raped. That was probably one of the biggest mistakes of my life at that point, was lying about something so serious. We get to the hospital, and my mom tells them right away, just give her a pregnancy test. She's pregnant. And they did, and I was. And then within a week of me finding all this out, my mom made all the arrangements for me to go to the abortion clinic and have an abortion. And that all happened within 2 weeks of me saying that to her. I went through some pretty awkward, painful things, and it was over, and we left it at that. And then we just never talked about it again until I did eventually have to tell her that I was a lie. I was pulled out of school because my mom thought that was the right thing to do. So I began homeschooling instead of going to high school. Probably like a little over a year after all the things happened with the abortion and everything. Things between my mom and I weren't great. We argued a lot. We both worked at the restaurant for the ministry. And one day it all came to a head, and we got into a really big argument. I said some things I shouldn't have said to my mom. I said, I'm leaving. And she said, fine. And I started to live with my grandma's. That was right around my 17th birthday. Once I moved out into my grandma's house, I did have a little bit more room to do what I wanted. I started to drink a little bit, smoke cigarettes. That came to the pastor's attention. So I was called into a meeting with the pastors. I was, pretty much told that I really wasn't welcome to come back to church if I continued in the ways that I was living. You're more welcome to come back whenever you're ready to serve the Lord, pretty much. And in that meeting, that was where it was my mom. I was very afraid of my pastors and what I believed that their discernment could tell them. I was very confused at that point about leadership and how it's really not something that the Lord has revealed to anyone. It was intimidation more than anything, intimidation on a young girl, to where I felt very vulnerable and very forced into telling my mom the truth. She decided to ask me about the whole situation in front of the pastors. And me being the very naive person that I was, I believed in my heart that they would be able to tell I was lying. And she knew that. So she asked me about the whole thing, and I told her the truth. I said, no, it's not true. None of that's true, what I told you. Instead of any support, I was wrong for what I did. I was wrong for lying. Pastors, they were more disgusted than I think my mom was. And instead of wanting to try and, help or discuss anything that was actually going on or wrong, I just felt more guilt and more shame and more alone than probably ever.
What was your sense of God during all of this?
I was afraid of God. I thought God was literally like, up in heaven, just kind of waiting for me to mess up again. I really felt like the way God was just done with me after every time that I'd done something wrong. Like, I didn't get that notion on my own. The place I grew up, they were very, very big on, this could be your last sin before it's just over for you. God will be done with you. Nothing could be farther from the truth. There's nothing that I had done or will do that I could ever be unforgivable in God's eyes. They were very deceitful in the way that they made people believe that they had some sort of special line with God that nobody else had, and God would give them the lowdown almost on who was gonna not be able. This could be it for you. You know what I mean? Like, you do this, and then you might just be done. And I've heard them say that to other individuals. Well, God's done with you. That you're hopeless almost. It's a hard pill to swallow, especially when you feel like it's true. Now looking back, I know that it's not. But at the time, as a child, I was very, very afraid and very upset with God almost, because it just didn't make sense to me. I'm supposed to live for God. I'm supposed to give my life to God. I was never taught to have a relationship with Him. I was taught that these were the rules. This is what you do, and if you don't do it, then you're not saved, and then God doesn't love you anymore. That's the importance of having a relationship with Jesus and not just following all these rules like Pharisees. It's not about perfection. You know what I mean? You can't be perfect. The only person that's ever lived a sinless life was Jesus. And the Bible tells us that any man that says he doesn't sin is a liar. It's, it's a daily thing that you have to lay down every day. You have to lay down your life, in a sense, to not give into it. And sometimes it happens. Nobody, you know what I mean? It's not like you're done. And that's how I felt. So at this point, when I was almost pretty much told not to come back until I was done with whatever I was doing, if that ever happened, I was like, okay, well, I can do what I want now. I lived with my grandma, and she gave me more than ample room to do as I pleased, as long as I was home by a certain time. And, I was following the rules pretty much. I had a car, I did what I wanted. So I started drinking, I started smoking, I started doing recreational drugs, and I still worked at the ministry for probably another few months, and then I was fired because I was just an awful employee. Now at this point, I was out partying all the time, getting way too drunk. And at that point, the whole perfection issue was, well, I literally can't do this anyways. I fail every day. And no matter what, I'm gonna fail. So my outlook on life was, okay, well, I can't make it to heaven. I can't make it, so I'm just gonna have a good time. Started doing recreational drugs like ecstasy, cocaine. I was only 17 at the time. I met a guy, and we started dating, and I got pregnant pretty quickly. I think it was a little bit after my 18th birthday, I found out I was pregnant. And at this point, I hadn't spoken to my mom literally in the entire year almost that I was gone. I didn't see her. We didn't have contact. When I did see her, when I still worked there, she really ignored me. So we didn't speak. I was still scared of my mom, though. I was still scared of the whole situation. And I told her I need to talk to her. And that was the first time we'd sat down and looked at each other in a year. And she already know that you're pregnant. And so I said, yeah, I am, and then we had this whole discussion, I guess you could say, about my boyfriend and that I needed to be married. Once again, I agreed with her. As much as there was issues between me and my mom, I wanted nothing more than to just have her approval. Before I had the baby, we got married, and had my son when I was almost 19, and we were married and living life. And I had quit doing, I wasn't doing really recreational drugs at that point. I smoked weed every day, but I wasn't drinking heavily, and I wasn't doing party drugs and all that stuff once I obviously got pregnant. And everything was good for a while, and probably about a year into our marriage, I was introduced to crystal meth. That quickly took over my life. I definitely felt like I had found something that I was always looking for. It made me feel great about myself. I lost a bunch of weight, which was something that was always very important to me. I always felt uncomfortable in my body. I was very insecure about how I looked. So everything seemed great for a while, but it doesn't take long for things to start to unravel when you're doing drugs. And that's what's important to you. My marriage began to fall apart because I was young and I didn't know what it took to make a marriage work. Nobody ever taught me. It was another thing that I literally just felt like I was failing at. So we started having some pretty big issues. The meth usage actually kind of dwindled because I was unable to get it anymore. For whatever reason. I would still do it every now and then when I could find it or whatever. I got a job at a bar when I was 20, almost 21, and that was the beginning of a lot of heartache for me. I began to get drunk on a regular basis, blackout drunk, probably a good 5 days out of the week. It didn't take long for my marriage to completely fall apart at that point because I was just getting drunk and blacking out, in either not coming home or driving home so drunk that I didn't remember how I got there. I ended up starting a relationship with someone. It was wrong completely. I was married. That led to me moving back into my grandma's. Was drinking very heavily every day. My son was with me a lot of the time. Like I definitely would go, like I would go to my grandma's house when I knew I had him. It was a struggle to do that though, because I always was either drunk or hungover or something. So it affected my ability to be a mom as well. I was drunk a lot. I'm blessed to be here. I injured myself many, many times. I mean, I've almost broke my jaw falling places. I've given myself concussions falling. The relationship with the older guy it didn't take long to completely fall apart because the grass always looks greener from over here, you know. And you're you know you feel like it's gonna be this, you know, it's just all rainbows and lollipops, and then you go and you actually start living it and it's a nightmare. And that's what happens no matter where you're at. If you're drinking to the point of blackout on a daily basis, you're not happy with your life. It doesn't matter who you're with, it doesn't matter what you think. It's a you problem. It's not something that can be fixed by another person, or you know what I mean. So it's our relationship fell apart pretty quickly. Me and my ex-husband at the time, we got back together. We were still married. We got back together for a while, and I was just such a heavy drinker, pretty much. Like I couldn't control it. Like I would leave, say I was gonna go get a hamburger and like just not come back until like the next day because I was drinking. I would go to the bar and then that was it for me. Like I would just be done. We did that for a while again, and then I ended up moving out again. And that time I was in a car accident. What happened was I let someone who actually ended up being the father of my second child. We were driving drunk, very drunk. I don't remember the entire day. I don't remember anything that day. I don't remember anything until 3 days later when I woke up in the ICU with a ruptured spleen and fractured ribs and a punctured lung, collapsed lung. So the car accident happened on Saturday night. We were driving. We had been taking Xanax and drinking liquor all day. And he ran into a tree on the Devil Strip head on. And the seatbelt, which thankfully I had on, it was an automatic seatbelt, because if I hadn't had a seatbelt on, I would have went through the windshield. And that happened Saturday evening. I don't remember anything until I think I woke up the very first time I woke up for a minute on like Monday, and then I blacked out again until like Wednesday when they moved me at ICU. I was in pretty bad shape, punctured lung. I mean, that was not so painful as much as the ribs, and they were worried about having to take my spleen out, which thankfully they didn't have to do. I was in the hospital for about a week, and I was scared straight, or thought I was for a minute. You know, I was not going to drink anymore, and that was that. That's what I was, because it was not a good idea. And then I went home to my husband, the wonderful guy that he is. He took me back and he took care of me and he nursed me back to health. And like literally, I couldn't shower by myself. I couldn't cook. I was, bedridden for quite a while. He took care of me. Thank God for that. Thank God for him, because I don't know where I would have been without that. About 5-6 months after the whole accident, I'm fine, I'm back to health, I feel good, and I'm out to dinner and I order a drink. And that obviously didn't go over well with my husband. And it was just one drink, but he knew, and I knew too, but he knew very well what that meant. And so we began not at odds again, to the point where I left again. I left. That was the last time I left. I'm drinking again. I'm out. I'm driving around drinking, acting like I didn't almost die 6-7 months ago. I then begin to hang out with the guy that wrecked my car. One thing leads to the next, and we're dating. We started dating. I fell in love with him, right? I thought I did. at the time. I'm not really sure. I mean, as much as a person who doesn't love themselves, like, it sounds really stupid because people say it all the time, you can't love anyone else until you love yourself. And I definitely hated myself. But I loved him, I thought, as much as I ever could, you know, as me. I thought I fell in love with him. So we're in a relationship, you know, everything's hunky-dory, and, you know, we're having a great time. I get pregnant again. I have my son. I decided to quit drinking. It was just hindering my life. I didn't just quit cold turkey. Here's here's the twist. I decided to quit drinking because I started to do meth again. That was, it became more readily available to me at that point. So I quit drinking almost entirely. I don't think I had it. I'm pretty sure. I got pregnant, and then after I had the baby, like, I just never picked it back up again. Like, I just didn't drink anymore. And then once I had the baby, I was sober for a while, for a couple months. And then me being the addict that I was, couldn't really handle being sober. Like, because when you're sober, you have to sit with your thoughts. You have to sit with your own self and deal with emotions, anything that might come up in your mind. And that's just not something at that point. And I think I was almost 30 at this point. I was 28. And that was still something that I just was not willing to do, was sit with myself and all of the things that I felt, you know, that I had done, or all of my thoughts. It just was too much. So I started doing meth, and once again, it's great for a while, and then things began to unravel. My life was just in shambles at that point from the drugs, pretty much. I mean, I didn't like my choice. I knew it was wrong, but I just did it. It was almost robotic at that point. He went to jail, and I was left to fend for myself, I guess you could say, and we broke up. When it came to him, I was very emotional. Like, I didn't want to let him go, and I really felt like I was just so in love with him, and I couldn't live without him. So he was gone, and I found all these things out about him, and so at that point, it was almost like when I got left church, like, I was off. Like, I had no remorse. I had no feeling about him or what I had. All I had in my mind was almost revenge, in the manner of, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do everything. My drug usage depended on him. I was never, like, out trying to find drugs. I was never out partying without him. So me being put in all these situations suddenly where I'm alone, I'm definitely vulnerable. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Had no respect for myself, my body, anyone else's body or relationships at that point. Like, I was kind of, like, done with life. I was very bitter. When it came to relationships, I wanted nothing to do with a relationship with a man. If anything, it was physical, and that would be something that I usually just kicked to the curb after so long, or wasn't. I was never in a committed relationship after that, till I found the Lord. Time goes on, you know, you meet more and more people, you get plugged into more and more connections, and I started to sell drugs. I started to sell meth, or ice. I was never, like, a huge drug dealer, but it definitely escalated to the point where I was making money and just doing things that were very dangerous, putting myself in positions as a woman, as a girl, that I should never have done, very dangerous situations. You know, the Lord definitely had his hand on me, keeping me safe in all these crazy places that I put myself. Since the last time I moved out of my husband's house, I'm living at my parents' house. At this point, the actual mental state I thought I was in, I felt good about myself. I felt like I had finally made something of myself. I wasn't a fiend anymore. You know, I wasn't broke all the time, and I was given, you know, I was applauded for taking my son to school and picking him up every day. People were just like, oh, you take your son to school and pick him up? Like, yay. You know, so, I mean, it just made me feel a little elevated above the rest of them, you know, and that's just completely the wrong way to think, because I was no better than anyone. I'm still no better than anyone, but I definitely felt like I was above, just because I did a few simple things that other people that were on drugs didn't do. So I felt like I was okay. I felt like I was doing fine in life. I still, the whole time, living at my mom's house. She's definitely not happy with the situation. Like, she knows what's going on pretty much. And thankfully, I mean, to be honest, I thank God for my parents, because I wouldn't have my son if they hadn't allowed me to have a place to stay and to have somewhere where he would be when I wanted to leave, whenever I wanted. You know, like, I would leave every single night to go handle my business, and my son would be at my mom's house with my mom. Things started to really unravel when the pandemic hit. And my mom was always talking about the rapture and talking about the Lord coming back. And ever since I was little, that was also always a very big fear, a very, very deep-rooted fear in my life. Like, it was almost like a trigger. Like, it was something that was not spoken of. I don't like to hear about it. I don't like to have people talking about it around me. And my mom, she was talking about, to my dad when the pandemic hit, you know, she was talking about how she felt that this was a precursor to the Lord coming back. And Henry, my son, was sitting there, and I just kind of went off on her, and I was like, look, I don't want to hear about it anymore. I'm done hearing about it. I've been hearing it since I was a kid. I've been hearing it any day now since I was a kid. I don't want to hear it. Just drop it. And I don't want my son to hear it either. I don't want it around him. She pretty much told me it doesn't matter what I want, because it's her house. And, you know, but we had a little argument at that point about it, and I was just done with it. And I'm still just like pushing everything back. The world is a really evil place, and I refuse to really see that. And what happened was someone I was really close to, or thought I was really close to, I found out that they were a pedophile. It took me a while to even process what I had figured out or what I had found out and seen. And once that happened, I became very depressed and just anxious. At that point, I was chasing down all these ideas in my head about what I could do to change, to help kids even, like just everything. I had all these emotions and ideas. It was all just too much. Like, I really felt like my head was caving in. At this point, I had discovered a drug called DMT. And it's been about a year since I started using it heavily. That's what I really used every day. Like, I, sadly enough, was still using meth probably at least once a day, because I was addicted to it physically. Like, I felt like I needed to smoke it. So I would do a little bit of that, but my main thing for a very long time at the end was DMT. I smoked DMT. For a long time, it made me feel okay. It made me feel good. But then when all this stuff started happening and I found all these things out, it became a different feeling. It became more somber, and it made me have different emotions. Like, I couldn't handle how it made me feel. So my little brother, Jeremy, him and me, we're pretty close. We've been pretty close our whole lives. We've had many conversations about many different things, but there was a certain conversation a while back, a few years, probably 5-6 years ago, about how I didn't believe in God, you know, and how we were both really very high when we had this conversation. So it's very odd that we were even talking about it. But I didn't believe in God, or I thought I didn't believe in God at that point. For a very long time, the existence of God was something I questioned, at least to other people when it came up. In the back of my mind, I knew that he was real. Give me one good reason why I should believe in God, is what I said to my brother the one time. And without even taking a thought to it, he said, you should be thanking God that you're breathing. You should be thanking God there's a sun in the sky. You should be thanking God for the breeze blowing through the trees. And that literally stuck with me, that the breeze in the trees, because as I'm looking in the trees in my backyard, I hear my brother, and he's like, you should be thanking God for the breeze in the trees right now. And I stopped, and I thought about it for a second, and I was like, you're right. This is a miracle. Like, I mean, it's a miracle I'm sitting here, that I'm smoking, that I'm doing any of this stuff, that I'm alive. So it all just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks that God was real. And my thing was, at the time, I didn't know. Like, I was very scared. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't have any faith in I had no faith that I could even make it at this point. But I broke down, and I told him I was sorry, and that I would serve him. The Lord began to work in me that day. Thankfully, the Lord kept working in my life to the point where I wanted to begin to go to church. That didn't take long for me to come to that conclusion, and I just didn't know where to start. I'm still doing things I'm not supposed to do. I used a few times. I was doing things I wasn't supposed to do. But in the back of my mind, the Lord is still working, like, okay, I knew what I was doing was wrong and that I had to stop. I just didn't know how at that point. Like, I really had no idea. And I always thought that in order to stop doing drugs, I'd have to go to rehab, like fully. Like, I went to a few assessments before, and they were like, you need full inpatient treatment. Like, they were like, whatever's wrong with you, you're going to have to go away for like a year and then come back, and you might be able to, be okay for a while. I began reaching out to people that I had known from church, maybe prior to that, like that were at different churches. I asked advice about, where they think I should go or what I should do. And I got some advice from a few people. I actually was on my Facebook feed, and this post popped up from one of my friends, Larry. And he's someone that I knew from my past. He worked at the bar when I worked there as a bouncer, and I knew of him, and I knew what he was delivered from. He was very open about his testimony and about what God had done in his life. And he was praying with a homeless man in this picture. He was praying with a homeless man at outreach that the church does. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to ask him what he thinks I should do, obviously. And so I messaged him. He said, well, you come to our church and give it a try or whatever, and I said, okay. And then the next morning, my friend Amanda, she came and picked me up, and I was going to go to church, to be honest. That was the plan. I was going to go, I had a ride lined up for someone to come pick me up, but she called me and she had some DMT. And I was like, okay, come pick me up. And I called my ride, and he got all mad because I was bugging him for days to bring me to church. And then I was like, never mind, don't worry about it. So we go hang out, at her house, and smoke some DMT and whatever. And then she's dropping me back off at my house, and church hadn't started yet. And I said something about, well, I was supposed to go to church this morning. And she had heard me previously the past few weeks talking about how I wanted to get back to church, And what happened was I was planning on going to another church, and I didn't go. And I lied to her about going. And I said something about how I needed to go because I hadn't made it yet. And she was like, I thought you said you went to church last week. And I was like, yeah, I didn't do that. And she was like, you lied about going to church, and like she knew about my trauma and like all the things that really had happened that made me turn away from church. So she understood why I didn't go to church, but she was like, okay, well, just go get dressed and I'll drop you off at church. And I was like, nah, I don't really think that's a good idea. And she was like, look, I've been hearing about this for months. You need to go to church. Just go get dressed real fast and I'll take you. So I go get dressed real fast. She drops me off here at the front door. And I get out, and immediately I light up a cigarette, and I'm like, I've got to prepare to go into this place. She looks at me, and she's like, I'm not driving away till you walk in the door. And I was like, fine. So I put my cigarette out, and I walk in, and Larry is standing in the back because it hadn't started quite yet, and he was waiting for me to show up. And he introduced himself, and then I came in. And I honestly might have sat either here or the pew behind me right now. The way that they did things here and the way that I felt during the whole thing, it was just completely different than anything I really experienced at my church ever. The message that he preached that day, there was someone was actually filling in for our pastor, but the message that he preached, it was something that I felt spoke to my heart, and I ended up having a conversation with Larry after church about a lot of things that I had been going through. And then I went home. Larry, he had gotten a Bible for me because I didn't have a Bible. I started coming back to church immediately. He would come and pick me up, and he would take me home. And it was a whole new thing. It was the first time in my life where I wanted to go to church. Like, I actually looked forward to going to church every week. The people here were amazing. Didn't feel judged by anyone. They were very loving, and just made you feel like you were at home, like they knew you and they wanted the best for you. And I barely knew these people. Larry and we were hanging out a little bit, and hung out more and started hanging out every day. And then before you knew it, we were kind of dating. And that was just about a month in. Like, it kind of happened really fast. And like, we weren't dating, but we were dating because we were seeing each other every day. And at that point, he broke up with me, kind of, for someone who's weren't dating. But I always say that he dumped me. But what had happened was he could tell what his relationship, our relationship, was hindering what I needed to do in order to get my life together. As far as my walk, my spiritual walk was going, and it was, I guess, looking back, he's right. And the Lord put it on his heart that whatever we were doing, it needed to stop. To be honest, I was very upset and I was very hurt. And I was like, this is what happens when I go to church every time. Like, I can't win for losing. You know what I mean? I was very upset. At first, I'm not going to lie. At first, I came to church every week only because I knew he thought I was going to stop coming. Because I didn't want to come. I didn't want to face him. I didn't want to face any of these people because I didn't really know anyone. But I knew, like, I just felt very uncomfortable with the situation, and but I just kept coming. And looking back, I know it was the Holy Spirit pushing me to just keep coming and keep coming. And what happened was the women here, the pastor's wife, she's a wonderful woman, and they actually have had this thing here that I'd never heard of in my life, which is called discipleship. And I was here, it was a couple weeks after me and him had our falling out or whatever, and the pastor said, if there's any women who are interested in discipleship, get a hold of Kelly, and she'll work all that out, and you guys can figure out when you're going to do it, And so we began meeting up every week, the women in the church that wanted to be discipled. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to take care of myself outside of selling drugs. I hadn't had a job for years. I slipped up a few times. I slipped up and I got high. But what happened every time I did that was I felt bad about it now. Like, I felt this voice in my head tell me, like, what are you doing? This isn't right. You know what I mean? I had guilt. Before, it was nothing to me. It was second nature, you know what I mean? To just have a pipe in my purse. I can't do this anymore. And it got to, it kept going, and I kept being discipled. Every week we'd meet up, and every week we'd open the Bible, and for the first time in my life, the word spoke to me. When things were explained to me that I was taught as a child, things that I was very confused about, things that turned me away from God, when they were explained to me in the right context, what the Bible is really saying about it, it changed my whole outlook on life. Like, the fact that I could never be good enough, it's not true. God chased me down the entire time I was gone, you know what I mean? Without that, I wouldn't be here. I would be dead, or I would be in prison. By the grace of God, I'm not. By the grace of God, I am completely clean and sober. I never went to rehab. And there's nothing wrong with rehab. There's nothing wrong with doing a program. But I can say with complete confidence that I'm delivered. I'm not an addict. I'm not, hi, I'm Melissa, I'm an addict. I haven't done drugs. I have no desire to do drugs. Like, that's something that I don't struggle with. I haven't struggled with for a very long time. And that's crazy to me. I've never been sober. I'm 40 years old now, and this all happened between 37 and 38. And the thought of being sober ever was just like unattainable. Like, sober, like, and no weed, nothing. The thought of that was just, I couldn't grasp it. And the more time I spent here with people that love me and show me the right way, people that care about people, that's what you have to do. They'll know that you serve the Lord because of the love you have for each other. And the love and the support that I received from these women and men, even everyone here, but the women especially, to teach me and to guide me in the ways that I need to know, and the actual, the word, what it says about me, what God says about me. And that's all that matters, is what God says about me. After a few months of the discipleship, at that point I had pretty much cut everything out. Like, it took a long time. I wouldn't say I struggled with it, but I struggled to cut everything out completely. Like I would always try to hang on to my weed, or like, God, if it's okay for me to smoke, then, I would just try to always find an out for it. But then that all went away. Like it eventually the more you walk with the Lord and the more that you have the Holy Spirit in the back of your mind telling you, this isn't right. You're better than this. You can do this. With God, you can definitely do anything. I was definitely a heavy user, heavy drinker. Like I was known for using drugs. That's what I did. So I've been sober for almost 3 years now and haven't looked back since.
So I got to say this, Melissa, we grew up together and I saw your struggle. I was in your struggle. We used to do drugs together every now and then. And when I was in prison, I remember telling someone that there were 2 people that I thought would be dead before I got home. And you were one of them.
I honestly, there was a time where I almost did die, I was accidentally given heroin one time instead of meth. And thank God it was before fentanyl was rampant, because I would be dead. Like it definitely put me out for a couple days. But yeah.
What would you say to someone who is struggling to believe that Jesus loves them?
I understand. I completely understand where they're coming from, because it is a struggle, and that's what the devil has done, though. That's his job that he's done so well at this point in the world, is to downplay God. And when people do think of God or consider God, they always feel that they're not loved by him. That's one thing that the devil has definitely succeeded at in a lot of ways, is deceiving people into thinking that God is not completely in love with them and wants nothing more than to just have communion with them and just to be with them, to live in them, And I would also say, get in the Word, because there's nothing like actually reading the Bible and understanding that God does love you, and that there's nobody in this entire world, including your parents, your kids, anybody, nobody in this entire world loves you like he does and wants to love you like there's no comparison. And once you realize that, you want to please him. You want to, it's not like I'm sitting here following all these rules, doing all these things that I have to do. I want to do them. There's nothing in the Bible that there's nothing that the Lord is going to tell you to do that isn't going to make you a better person, that isn't going to enrich your life, that isn't going to, even though it might seem hard, even though it might feel like you don't want to do it, or you have to lay your pride down to do it. That's a big thing lots of times, because you have to love whether you're loved or not, and that's hard. But once you realize that the Bible is definitely more than just a book, and it's what God, it's an outline for how we're supposed to do everything in our life. You know what I mean? There's nothing, if you have a question about anything, it might take you a while, but it's in the Bible. It's in there. It'll tell you what to do about it and how to do it. And it might not be easy.
Once you got clean and sober, was it hard for you to let go of old friends and old connections?
No, only because I had gotten to the point, to be honest, like I said, I was a very cold person. I was very unfeeling. Like I had friends, but I had no real friends. I had friends that liked me because I had drugs. I didn't have anyone that I considered someone that I was attached to, or like anything like that. They were just customers or acquaintances. So it wasn't really hard, especially whenever you come into a situation where you have so much love surrounding you, like in this place. I didn't feel the need to go. Like I didn't feel the need to go anywhere and search out anything anymore. Like I felt more, I've never felt more complete in my entire life. Leaving the world behind is, once you realize what it's done to you, and once you see that for what it is, you can't go back to it, because it did nothing for me except for, I mean, it almost took me out. Like, if I wouldn't have been put to jail or killed, I mean, I would have lost my mind. Once you see it for what it really is and you give God the credit that he deserves, it's kind of a no-brainer after that. Like, you see, like, once you have the Holy Spirit, once you've literally asked Jesus to come into your heart and you have the Holy Spirit and you give over to that, it changes everything about you. So everything that you want or you think you want, it changes. Everything that you've thought you needed in your life, or, you know, anything like that. It's just all, it's through a completely different scope now. Like, it's looking at the world with a new, I mean, renews your mind. Ironically, it's crazy for me sitting here right now talking about it, because I never in a million years, like, you know, I'm homeschooling my son. I'm a stay-at-home mom, you know what I mean? Like, I have my own home for the first time in my life. All these things I'm learning how to do, like, as I go, but I wouldn't want it any other way. Like, you know, Satan had me thinking that selling drugs and living on my mom's front porch and not having a car or a license, that's just what I was gonna do for the rest of my life. Like, it could be challenging at times. Like, I'm not challenged by sobriety, like, at all. Thank God. I don't struggle with that. My challenges every day are just to lay my life down and say what God wants me to say instead of what I want to say, or just everyday things that I never ever considered in life. You know, how to deal with my kids, raising my kids, teaching my kids about the Bible, just how I'm supposed to be pleasing God in everything I do. And then I fall short, obviously, but that's okay. You just keep striving.
Finally, you spent years being a prisoner of the devil. What does it feel like now being a prisoner for Christ?
It's the most freedom I've ever experienced. Normal, everyday human activities that people do, like, it's freeing. It's the most freedom I've ever had. Freedom to just be a person and be a mom and be a wife. Oh, because I get married. We got back together. Larry and I, after I was discipled for a while, things we ended up getting back together, and we're married now. We've been married for almost 2 years.
And don't you have a little girl?
We do. We have my daughter. We just had her in August, and she'll be a year old soon. And yeah.
Melissa, would you pray for those who are struggling with addiction and are having a hard time leaving the world behind?
Sure, I could do that. Father, thank you for this opportunity today with my brother, someone who also is very surprised to be sitting here. This is just a beautiful thing that we are able to experience, the freedom that you've given us to serve you, and the freedom to help others find the same peace of mind. Lord, I ask that anyone watching this or listening to this that is struggling with anything, addiction to drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex, anything that is binding them, I just ask that you speak to them and let them feel your love that you have for them, Lord. Draw them to you by your Spirit. Just give them the ability to know that they can cry out to you, Lord, wherever they're at, whatever they're doing. It doesn't matter. You'll come. If they call, you will come. You'll come, and you can save and you can heal every part of them, Lord. And I just ask that you do that. Thank you again for delivering me completely, for giving me this life that I'm living today, for giving me this opportunity to really share what you've given me. Thank you so much. We love you and praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.